Hello and welcome to Plymouth Profiles. Plymouth Profiles is an opportunity to meet with people from the greater Plymouth area, and today I'm delighted to have Joseph Lally. He is a member of the Plymouth Advisory and Finance Committee. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Steve.
So, Joe, for people that may not have met you before, give us a little bit of your background. Where did you grow up?
I was born in Asheville, North Carolina, and was there until about 1966, where I went away to prep school in Pennsylvania, and then came back to North Carolina after graduating from prep school and had what are called gap years now, and then eventually found my way north, where I worked on dairy farms for a couple of years and decided I wanted to perhaps pursue a doctor of veterinary medicine degree, and got into Cornell. Had a great freshman year and was working at the airport part-time, putting myself through school, and got to my sophomore year and ran smack dab into organic chemistry and realized I'd made a terrible mistake. So I dropped out and flew airplanes for about 8 years, and then eventually realized that was a dead-end career, and got a job at Cornell in facilities. And promptly enrolled in the employee degree program, got an MBA there back in the days when it was truly free.
It's interesting. I didn't know this before we came on, but I have twin daughters, and one went to North Carolina to Duke for college, and the other went to Cornell.
Wow. Which college?
She was an undergrad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I stayed at Cornell for 29 years. We built a house and raised a family there, and then had an opportunity to go to Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, otherwise affectionately known as Harvard on the Hocking River. And was there, did a couple of years. I was recruited away to the Applied Physics Lab at Johns Hopkins in Laurel, Maryland, and then subsequently recruited away to come to Northeastern in 2019, in January of 2019, which is how I got to Plymouth.
And that's where my wife graduated from college.
Wow,
Eastern,
great.
So interesting.
But during my time in Ithaca, I was did a stint as a county board rep to fill out a term.
Cool.
Didn't get elected in the following election. I thank my lucky stars some days. But I was also on the planning board for 25 years, 13 years as chair. So I've always had a desire to be involved in the civic side of things and volunteer time. And our family and children and wife have always been involved in volunteer activities. So
a lot of municipal government experience.
Yes,
really. Yeah.
And interest. And so when I got to Plymouth, I thought, well, maybe, there's an opportunity on the planning board, but here they are elected positions, and I wasn't well known and had no interest in running for office, but somebody said, well, what about FinCom? And so that's how we first communicated, and I expressed an interest, and time went by, and all of a sudden I got a call one day, and well, here I am on FinCom.
So when were you first appointed?
I think it was in 2020.
Okay.
It was before COVID for sure.
Yeah.
And so I think I re-upped, and I think I've got another couple years on the current appointment.
You're in your second term. All right. So FinCom is the Advisory and Finance Committee in Plymouth. So tell us a little bit about that. How would you describe that committee?
Well, it's interesting, and I think we perform a function where we review any article that would be going to town meeting. Is probably one of our basic duties. Plus, we also get to opine on not only financial concerns, but also, I'll say, strategic concerns that are brought for us for our consideration and proposals to changes in bylaws and things like that. Plus, we have the budget subcommittees that are set up shortly after the first of the year, and we go through a marathon of going through all of the town budgets, including the school budget, and ultimately make recommendations on all the articles that are going to go to town meeting in an advisory capacity.
That's one of the things that people don't always realize. They think, oh, FinCom, finance, and yet, when I'm making appointments, I'm looking at the varied backgrounds of many applicants, because this past town meeting, we had a zoning bylaw proposal. So someone like you with 25 years experience on a planning board would have maybe some expertise that other members wouldn't have. But, what are your thoughts about when the planning board proposals come before FinCom?
Well, I would say in general, the beauty of the Finance Committee, Advisory and Finance Committee, is when we're at full capacity, there are 15 people who have diverse backgrounds. Some have been in the town since, forever, born here, raised here, generationally have been here. and they offer a perspective. And there are other people with very diverse backgrounds who also bring their own perspectives and different points of view on how things should be run or not run. And that's the beauty of a group like that, is the opportunity, and it's a forum to encourage diverse thought, and it's really important to come in with a very open mind about what the outcomes of a particular vote might be, and to listen. And I would say, by and large, the debate is very civil, even though the opinions can be on very wide apart, or sometimes they're very close together. So that's, I think, the beauty of that whole process.
When do you normally meet?
The second Wednesday of the month at 7 o'clock in the Great Hall.
And it's a hybrid meeting?
It is a hybrid meeting, and we certainly took advantage of that during COVID, but we still take advantage of it even today, and there's times where I have to attend remotely. Okay. But it's nice to get out back and get with people.
And then what happens during, just before town meeting? You have more than one meeting a month?
Oh, it's probably every week, and some weeks it's twice a week. And we endeavor to get out somewhere between the 2 and 3 hour mark, but only on a couple of occasions have we gone beyond the 3 hours. But it's there's a clock running. We realize that. And there's an awful lot of information to get through, and sometimes the articles don't get to us till late. And sometimes the articles are long and complicated, such as the charter review a year ago. That took a lot of time. And there are also some budgets that are far more complicated than other budgets.
So you said varied opinions. So at this past time, we're taping this in April of 2025, and we just finished our spring annual town meeting. And in the special, there was Article 12, and your committee had a split vote.
Yes, we did. So there were, I think it was four in favor, 8 against, and 2 abstentions. So I think one of the things that was interesting about that article, and it certainly, in my opinion, played out at town meeting, was that there were people in this camp and there were people in that camp, and there wasn't a lot of middle ground. So I think what was important is that at town meeting and at the Advisory and Finance Committee, the conversations were respectful and civil.
And you held what would be, I guess, hearings or meetings on each article.
Yes.
And the public can come and speak and participate?
Yes.
No public comment?
Yes. So there's usually public comment at the beginning of the meeting. There's an opportunity for public comment in the discussion and question part, the question part of an article. And then also at the end of the meeting, there's an opportunity for public comment, although usually people are long gone by then, especially if it's a late night.
And in terms of the organization of your committee, you have a chair?
Yes.
And there are vice chairs?
There's a vice chair. It's Gail Butler this year, and then Christine Robinson is our second vice chair.
Okay. And you're supported by staff?
Yes. Jeanette White is the one who keeps us on task in terms of, organizes, herds the cats, as I like to say. So, in addition to Mr. Neerman, who is the chair, but I think she provides the staff support that's very critical, prepares the minutes, helps prepare the agenda and get all the distributions out to us ahead of time, and also the unenviable task of preparing all the books for special meeting and town meeting that we have in the fall and in the spring.
Tell us about that. What are the books? What do they look like?
Well, there's several books. They can be this big or they can be about this big. But they're the budget books. There's also all the warrant articles and supporting information related to the warrant that we get before each meeting. One of the tasks is that, or challenges is that often that information comes in at the last minute. And on occasion, the Finance Committee may vote to not consider or to table if we feel that the information to make an appropriate decision is not there. So, for example, if the town's going to grant an easement to someone or a utility, and we don't have the supporting documents like a plat and the text of the easement, we've been known to table that until it comes back. And in fact, it happened this last cycle, and it didn't make it to town meeting.
And that's part of your job.
That's part of our job, and we are blessed with having one of our members who works in the assessor deeds office for the county. So that's one of her areas of expertise.
Good. I think you get a number of areas of expertise with many of the members. When we have articles coming before town meeting, most of the motions are presented by the Advisory and Finance Committee, but they aren't always what's in the warrant. Is that correct?
That is correct. We, on occasion, Advisory and Finance Committee, for whatever reason, may decide to amend the proposed article, and I believe that if that carries it, Administrative Finance, then the chair of the Finance Committee presents that as the initial warrant and notes that it's different from what the Select Board or the petitioner has proposed. And then there's appropriate action taken at town meeting to decide how people want to vote. And then there's always the amendments from the floor as well.
Sure. And I think we saw that at our most recent annual, where on a petitioned article, the Advisory and Finance Committee presented a main motion that was a little bit less than what was in the petitioned warrant article. But then, as you said, we can always have amendments to it.
Yes. So it's a process that I'm coming to understand in terms of how it's working. I happen to be reading the book that you suggested on the new How to Be a Town Moderator, edition 4. So I'm up to chapter 3 now. But
good.
It helps explain some of the process to me. But I think there's a process, and you learn the process and make it work.
And,
I mean, it's a nice, messy form of democracy, and I love it.
Yeah, town meeting is different from the county form of government that you were used to.
Well, yeah, and also the town form of government in upstate New York as well. So
yeah, different. Yeah. What do they have? Do they have a legislature?
The county has a legislature. The cities have a legislature, and the towns have a legislature. So they have town reps, and they select a town manager as well. And usually, the biggest budget is the highway budget. The schools are run separately.
Interesting.
And they're in New York State, there's a separate school tax levy. It's a separate bill at a different time of the year. And there's an elected school board in most of the districts. And sometimes the districts span the county lines. Sometimes they span town lines. So they're an independent or separate organization from town and county government where I lived in upstate New York.
So you said the committee is made up of people that have been in Plymouth all their life and other people like you that are not been here all their life.
Newbies.
And tell me, have you ever had the opportunity at the meeting to share your experience in another place where you've lived so as to, help us understand that there are other ways to look at things or do things?
Not within advisory and finance necessarily. There are occasions where we're debating an article, and it may, sometimes relies on a member's expertise in terms of the work they've done or the volunteer work they've done or whatever it's done. So on facilities, I'm usually not afraid to opine about things involving, or questions come up about, or the one that came up at town meeting about, how often do you need to replace a turf field?
Right.
And fortunately, the facilities director was there, so you turned to him instead of me because I was raising my hand. But, my answer would have been 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
So he nailed it at around 12.
Yeah.
Just because I've had, as part of my day job, the opportunity or the task of budgeting for those kinds of things and those replacements. So that's how it creeps out, I think. But other than that, there's usually a little bit of an informal gathering, but it's usually not on topic of what we're going to be doing because we have to be respectful of open meeting laws. And
Are you still at Northeastern?
I retired in August of last year after a 40-year career plus a few weeks in higher ed facilities.
And what brought you to Plymouth?
We were looking for housing, and we've always loved living in what I'll say quasi-rural area, and so we had done a lot of homework before I started. I moved to a dorm room at Northeastern on a Saturday morning, and that following Sunday I met a realtor in Braintree, and we looked at about 11 properties, Middleborough and all that area, and the house we looked at Plymouth. She had the foresight to drive me down along Long Beach before heading to the house in Chilton Park and on Harbor Light Drive. And I was sold by the time we drove by the beach, and we got to the house, and my wife wasn't with me. I bought the house without her here.
Oh.
But she was on, we were FaceTiming. And,
Yes.
so it was just, you walked in and we knew it was a house. So
Good.
and it was done. Closed in March, and I moved in with a plate, a fork, a spoon, and a cup, and an air mattress, and then we moved out of the house from Maryland in May.
Now, thinking about the special town meeting Article 12, where it was divided vote, how does FinCom handle the presentation when you have not a unanimous vote of the FinCom members? What is presented at town meeting?
Well, I think in this particular case, the police chief came and spoke. There were questions that were asked. Members, we had a pretty good, for FinCom, turnout of the public, and they had their opportunity during public comment. And while there was a little bit of disruptive comment by one of the participants, they left quickly, so it was not a big deal. But I think there were presentations on both sides during the public comment period, and members of the committee asked the chief questions, and then we closed the question period, and there were motions made, and there was debate about the motions, and then a roll call vote was taken.
And so when you come to town meeting, the chair speaks on behalf of the committee and primarily speaks as to the majority vote of your committee, regardless of the chair's opinion.
Correct. And that's actually, if you take a step back, leading up to the spring and special meeting, the town meeting, we are all assigned multiple caucuses to attend. It was a pretty short schedule this year because the caucuses just didn't get scheduled until the last minute, or late in the game, I will say. So we were scrambling to staff those meetings, but we are directed to speak for the committee.
Right.
And so I've often had the pleasure of speaking for something I didn't support.
Okay.
But doing it on behalf of the committee, because that's our job, is to represent the committee. And on occasion, people will press me to say, well, what did you, we noticed that you voted against, for example. Why did you do that? And I said, well, my job here is to represent the committee. I will speak for myself and say, since you asked, but I was whatever side I was on, and this is why. But generally, I said, my job is really here to speak for the committee and represent the committee's wish.
And at this most recent town meeting, you also had at least one or two where you didn't move the main motion. FinCom didn't move it.
That is correct. I can't remember right now which ones those were, but there are motions where we either didn't consider them. So there was an article to deal with an easement, and there was not enough documentation for us to act on properly. And so, it was missing some critical documentation. We pressed, and it just never appeared. So maybe it'll show up for fall special meeting.
And so if you don't move the motion, though, your committee still presents your point of view, even if it's against the article.
We will, in the context of the caucuses, we'll say what happened. Yeah. And in the case of at special or town meeting, I think it will be, we'll report on what happened. We took no action, no motion, no action.
And if the select board moved an article, then you would speak following the select board and explain why you didn't support it.
Well, I'm if we were asked to do so, I think that someone from FinCom would do that. The chair, and this whoever is presenting, is prepared to present.
So, how has FinCom changed at all from when you first started till the present?
Well, I think so. This is Mr. Neerman is the first chair after the long reign of Mr. Canty, and so in terms of how the meetings run and the flow of the meetings, I think there's somewhat dependent upon personality, but in terms of its function and how we flow through the year, it's fairly stable. Fairly stable. There's a process.
Now, if people are watching and they were wondering about serving on FinCom, what would you say to them? I mean, I'm the appointment authority, so you can all contact me if you're willing to serve. But what would you say to maybe encourage somebody to serve?
Well, if you want to get an understanding about how the town operates and how you make changes in how the town runs, it's a good opportunity to, as I say, look behind the curtain and understand the parliamentary process of how you make changes in the town. And also, it's an opportunity to get a deeper understanding of the intricacies of what it takes to run a town. So, there's a school budget. How does that work? The school committee, I should say, but there's also DPW has a fairly big budget. There's the enterprise budgets, and also understanding, as I say, what the guardrails are that the town has to operate is set by the Commonwealth. What are the rules of the road, so to speak, and what can you do and not do, or what's the process for doing things like that. So it's a great way to learn, and I was very encouraged by the way some of the town meeting members dug into the budget this year and found a couple things that we were going to dive into this fall around Burke's Law, but we were on a really short fuse this year, but certainly something I want to dive into this year. And it turned out that there was $500,000 that was, I'm going to use the word found, that is not going to have to be in the tax levy because of the diligence of one of the town meeting members. So I think if you want to affect the change, it's important to know how to make changes, and I think you'll get a good dose of that. And I think you'll also meet a lot of interesting people, and I think other thing I think is people care a lot about this town. May not be on the same side of the argument as you are, but there's no doubt in my mind that people care about this place and put an awful lot of time into making Plymouth what Plymouth is.
Where do you see the Advisory and Finance Committee going in the future?
Well, nowhere, I hope. I think we will continue to do our reviews of articles that they come forward with. It's interesting. We don't have any resources because we were interested in, for example, in doing a construction audit of the Oak Street project. Now, I think I got to the place where we wanted to be with some separate conversations with select board members, but I think that's where I learned that we actually have no budget. Even when we have a budget, it's only used to fill in other budgets, but we have no operating budget. So that was a surprise to me. So whether we need one or not, that's up for discussion. And if we were to go argue for one, of course, it would have to be approved at town meeting.
Sure.
Some future town meeting. But I think that was an eye-opener for a lot of people. So whether that's necessary or not, I don't know. But I think we will continue to try to engage people and have enlightened discussions and around whatever articles come before us.
Now, as a person with facilities expertise, we had an article about school buildings and town buildings, and it turned out in the end that the town meeting did change the status quo. And based on your experience, do you have any comments about that particular plan?
I'm still trying to understand the problem statement. I think there needs to be some flexibility, particularly if times get lean. And but I also hear that people generally try to work it out amongst themselves between the school and the Department of Public Works. Both are very big jobs, and so in my time, I've in at least university administrations, which are not terribly different from very different from government administration. I've seen the centralization pendulum swift from independent to back to centralization, and I'm just not as familiar right now with the issues in this town as I've seen in other places. So I have decentralized and advocated for that. I've also centralized advocating for that. So it really becomes a question of what's the responsiveness look like, and at the end of the day, what's the information flow? So computer systems have helped argue for centralization, but on the other hand, even within centralization, we've done things like zone management. So as recently as Northeastern, we have people who focus on this college or the residential areas or the dining areas based upon their expertise and technical abilities. And it's how you manage that institutional knowledge. How do you leverage that institutional knowledge? Because the town, as near as I can tell, is blessed with longtime employees who have all this institutional knowledge. That's not easy to contract out.
Right.
So when you have a critical mass, I think it's important that you have employees who work for the institution, who have institutional knowledge that just doesn't depart one day.
As we tape this, the executive branch of the federal government is currently implementing tariffs. And at town meeting last Saturday, some town meeting members raised the question, when it came to purchasing vehicles or replacing vehicles, how soon can we do it? And of course, the response was not to the next fiscal year. But in your area, dealing with facilities and buildings, we're hearing now that we get lumber from Canada, we get gypsum from Mexico. Are these going to be a higher price? What do you think this is going to do to the town of Plymouth, if anything?
Well, I think it's going to raise costs for everyone in every field. So it isn't just there. There was talk about tariffs on Canadian hydro, and we get a lot of hydro, not only in Massachusetts, but in New England in general, from Canada. So none of this is looking good from my perspective. I'm a bit of a bear right now on the impact, and we're going to have to be flexible and stay abreast and learn how to react.
So, Joe, if you're not doing FinCom, what do you like to do in your spare time?
I like riding bicycle on the canals, and as I like to say, especially since I've retired, the dogs have been taking me for walks every day. And my wife is an avid master gardener, so I'm busy supporting that habit with her, and so we ride together on the bicycles, and we go on little side trips around here and things like that. So
good. Well, Joseph,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being with us and for your service on the Advisory and Finance Committee in Plymouth.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you. And this completes this portion of our presentation of Plymouth Profiles. But please stay tuned. We have the second half. We'll be joined by Plymouth's Planning Board Chair, Stephen Bolotin. So stay tuned, and thank you for being with us. I'd like to welcome you all back to this second half of today's presentation of Plymouth Profiles, where we have an opportunity to meet with people from the greater Plymouth area. And I'm delighted at this time to welcome and introduce the chair of the Planning Board for the town of Plymouth, Stephen Bolotin. Stephen, welcome.
Steve, thank you very much for having me.
So, Steve, for people that may not know you, give us a little your background. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up mostly out on Long Island, New York, in a town that is ironically very similar to Plymouth. So I grew up in Stony Brook, which is part of the Brookhaven Township, which is the largest township in the state of New York. It has an interior pine forest, coast on the Long Island Sound, and a great history from our colonial past. It's most noted for being the location for George Washington's spy ring, which was memorialized in the AMC TV series Turn.
Okay. And what about your education? Tell us about that.
I graduated from college, finishing at the State University of New York at Stony Brook. I then proceeded to do a law degree at the American University Washington College of Law, and finished doing a graduate law degree in international transactions at the University of London King's College.
And once you finished that graduate degree, what did you do?
I came back and worked in Washington, D.C. for a number of years, first doing complex litigation work, then working for environmental and engineering trade associations. I was the general counsel for a number of associations involved in various aspects of engineering, particularly in the environmental side. After a few years doing that, I met a girl and moved up to Boston to follow her, now my wife, of almost 30 years, and started working as an attorney here in the Boston area. I became a partner at a large firm where I concentrated on primarily representing municipalities, architects, and engineers involving mostly large commercial and municipal construction projects.
So environmental early and then municipal law.
Yes.
And so when did you come to Plymouth?
So back in 2005, my wife and I were looking for a weekend place, a getaway, weekend summers, something that would just sort of be allowed to move away from town, from the city, and relax a little bit. We found Plymouth and the Pine Hills and bought a small place there. After 4 years of doing weekends and summers, decided loved the place too much to ever leave. So in 2009, we bought our forever home and have been in Plymouth ever since.
Good, good. And so when did you first become involved in Plymouth town government?
So about 3.5 years ago, I decided I wanted to retire from full-time law practice. And my wife said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, honestly, I want to give back to my community. I want to take all of these years of seeing what other towns have done right and done wrong and bring that knowledge to help Plymouth guide itself in some of these same challenges. So a few years ago, I got involved. The first thing I did was I crazily decided to run for the select board. Nobody knew who I was. Nobody had heard my name before, but I threw myself in, both feet and a few other body parts first, and got to really know town and town government and met wonderful, wonderful people. And even though I wasn't successful in that run, it led to a lot of people asking me get involved in other ways.
True.
And the first way I was asked to get involved, other than I was asked to get involved in some town committees, but also I was asked to be the alternate on the planning board. And I spent 6+ months doing that, after which the members of the planning board said that one of our members is retiring and not running for re-election. We strongly encourage you to do that. And so I did, and I ran, and I was elected, and now I serve proudly the residents of Plymouth, hoping to try and help guide our future.
And when did you become chair?
I became chair last year. So originally, Brigitte Keene was chair. Then Tim Grandy was chair, and then this past year I was elected as chair.
So tell us a little bit about the planning board in Plymouth.
Planning board in Plymouth has essentially two functions. There's what you would probably call more of an administrative function. We take applications for various requests, changes, things like that in our zoning or building, and we consider those, and we consider those on a project-by-project basis. And then there's the planning side. There's the side looking at the grand picture of Plymouth. What do we want to do with respect to our land use? How does that impact all of the important things that happen in our community?
And so one of the things I know that you've worked on quite a bit is the master plan. Tell us about that. Is a master plan committee?
Yes, there is. So originally we started as a master plan task group. And the goal there was to understand what our master plan, our existing master plan, which was prepared in 2004 and adopted in 2006, where that was, what was good about it, what was bad about it, what was missing, what had changed, and what needs Plymouth had for a new master plan. That group met, we prepared a proposal, we created an RFP for consultants, and we presented that to the select board, the planning board, and town meeting. Town meeting authorized us to proceed with a master plan, and then a master plan committee was created. And that consists of a number of town officials, people from various town departments, as well as members of the public, ad hoc members of the public who just applied, who said, I'd like to put my voice and guidance in. And the goal of that committee is to do its absolute best to hear from the residents. We don't set the master plan. The residents do. They decide what they want their community to look like. Our job is to try and put together a plan that helps accomplish that.
And how long has this committee been in existence?
The committee's been in existence for a little bit over a year now. So we're in our first full year, really come June, to get that input from the town residents. And we've done that through a number of forums. We've done that through surveys. We've done that through listening sessions, individual meetings, group presentations, all of that. Hearing from as many people as we possibly can.
To whom will the committee report?
The committee ultimately reports to the planning board. Under state law, it is the planning board's responsibility to prepare, update, and approve the master plan. But the master plan will, of course, be presented to other bodies. It'll go to the select board and it'll go to town meeting, and we'll be asking those bodies to adopt the plan. Even though they don't formally approve it from the state purposes, It only works if we have buy-in from everyone.
And currently, do you sometimes have joint meetings with other boards?
Absolutely. So the planning board meets with the select board on a, I don't want to say regular basis, but at least a few times a year. We often do it in connection with some of the other things that have been done for planning. So, for example, we met jointly with the select board to approve the open space plan and the housing production plan. We did it in part with master planning as well. And we certainly have other boards and committees come to the planning board and make presentations, telling us what they're up to, what challenges they're facing. Most important from my perspective, what can the planning board do to help move your goals along? So the planning board is not just there to decide things, but rather to also facilitate.
And this master plan committee, do you have any sense yet as to what recommendations might be forthcoming?
Well, I think what we've heard from the community is there's some things that they love. They love the open space. They love our downtown and waterfront. They love the community feel that we have. They love the fact that we have a very open and inviting group of people, something I've personally experienced. They also see a lot of challenges. They are worried about traffic. They're worried about the loss of open space. They're worried about our environment and climate resilience and things like that. The biggest concern that we've heard at every forum, every survey, every group that we've spoken to, it's always been raised: affordability. The challenge in Plymouth is that, as I sadly like to say, we are a victim of our own success. People come here, they discover how wonderful Plymouth is, and they want to stay. And those people tend to be more affluent. Not just because that's who wants to come here, but Plymouth has also created an environment that encourages that particular type of resident. A lot of it's related to housing. So 71% of Plymouth is zoned rural residential. That's 3-acre zoning. Now, Plymouth did that many, many years ago with the idea that this will help prevent suburban sprawl and preserve our open rural lands. Because, well, at that point, who was going to come and spend all that money to build a house at that expense in Plymouth? It wasn't happening. That wasn't what our economy called for. That's obviously changed. Now, developers make a very, very good living selling 3-acre lots to people to build houses. So we're losing that rural land because we're encouraging that type of growth.
It's interesting when you say that things people like are the open space or the environment. When my son was in school on his graduate degree, he worked as a videographer during the summer for a community similar to ours in New Hampshire, and he was asked to make a travel video. And I would have thought, well, the restaurants or the stores, whatever. No, he did, a picture of the lake with a loon, or, the butterflies or the birds, or, a mountain. And it struck me, that's really what attracts people to certain communities, is those types of things. And I think in Plymouth, what you've heard is probably very true, is that people come not just because of shopping or things like that. They come because of the ocean or the 365 ponds that we have, or, the walking trails.
Well, that's it. Come see the rock, but stay for everything else.
Right. And affordability was certainly something that I heard when I interviewed candidates in last year's election. That was the number one issue, that the candidates who went knocking on doors said that was what they heard.
That jives with what we've heard. That jives with our surveys, and it jives with the statistics. So statistically, Plymouth has some real challenges. Obviously, the cost of housing is for some completely out of reach, partially because we encourage more expensive housing. If you're building a house on a 3-acre lot, you're not building a small affordable ranch, you're building a larger home. And people are coming and buying those. So that's a challenge that we face. We also face, obviously, the challenge from those state mandates that we're dealing with, MBTA communities laws, Chapter 40B housing. Those things are chances for the state to say, we want more housing, we don't care what you want, and they override our zoning. So we need to figure out ways how to address that. We can't stop them. The state has far too much invested in forcing new housing. So we need to come up with plans for Plymouth that work for Plymouth, not to avoid those things happening, but rather to encourage people not to do them, instead do the things that work better for our community.
The issue of affordability seems to even go beyond Plymouth. I understand in the recent presidential campaign that was also an issue of affordability. And I was recently traveling, and I happened to meet somebody at the airport from New Jersey that had been at a conference down in Florida, and it had to do specifically with this. They were using a different word. It wasn't affordable housing, and it was something like available or attainable housing was the euphemism that it was using. But I guess that's the question. How can we look to the future to have housing that's attainable for people?
Well, I think one of the answers, of course, is we need to focus development in the areas where development makes sense, where there's already infrastructure. One of the biggest expenses to the town is in expanding our infrastructure to address housing. And infrastructure just doesn't mean pipes and sewers and things like that, but it means our police, our fire, our schools. It's always a lot more cost efficient for the town to have a student in an area where there's already a school and a classroom to go to and a bus route to go onto than create a new school or a new bus route. So we need to design housing that's focused on areas where development makes sense. We also need to be more practical in terms of the type of housing. We need to give people more options, smaller housing. The only way, as I try and explain to people and they say, we need things to cost less. I say, yes, but land costs more, labor costs more, materials cost more, insurance costs more. How do you make it less? The only way to do it is to put more of it on a lot and make it smaller. Now, I don't particularly like the idea of going up high and creating skyscrapers. That's not Plymouth. That's not our character. But historically in Plymouth, going way back to colonial times, what did you do when you were starting out? Well, you built a little cottage. And then later, if you had a family or other circumstances, either you expanded your cottage or you moved. We need to go back to that idea of creating small cottages on a lot rather than one big house. I think that's at least a start. And that's something that the planning board is working on as a proposal for town meeting to consider.
I happen to know, because my son and daughter-in-law live in Red Brook, that they have cottages in Red Brook. In fact, I think my daughter-in-law's parents have a cottage in Red Brook. And so have we seen that elsewhere in the community?
Not so much. And Red Brook is actually now proposing as well their first series of affordable, and I say affordable as in meeting the state affordability guidelines, cottages. They're going to be putting a group of, I believe it's 8, maybe 10, up to that, cottages in an area designed to, again, create an opportunity for people to buy in, to create home ownership in our community rather than just rental. Because home ownership obviously makes people more invested in our town.
So recently it was reported that an employee or staff in the town of Plymouth found over 500 affordable houses or housing opportunities. What does that mean? What was that all about?
Well, the state keeps account. It's called our Subsidized Housing Index, SHI. And we have a certain number that we are credited with by the state. Now, some of the things that we had submitted to the state still hadn't been processed. Much like everybody else, the state is understaffed and they take a long time to go through applications. And we have a lot of applications sitting there saying we want credit for these things. And we hadn't gotten there. But on top of that, there were other houses, other units in Plymouth that had been deeded as affordable that the state hadn't even gotten submissions from, most of which hadn't even been properly submitted to the town for consideration. It's a challenge. I support our planning department with everything I have. They work very, very hard, but Plymouth has grown 20+% in the last 20 years. Our planning staff has not. So having somebody whose job is to monitor affordable housing and how it goes is just not something that's been in our budget. But it also hasn't been a priority for Plymouth because it really doesn't matter how much affordable housing we have until we get to 10%. And we're not close to that. even with the number that has been reported, 588 units, that brings us to 7.2% affordable housing. We are hundreds and hundreds of units, probably closer to 1,000 units of affordable housing short of 10%.
So, Steve, the Community Preservation Act provides for open space, historic expenditures, and affordable housing. How does the Planning Board relate to the Community Preservation Act?
Well, the goal, of course, of the Community Preservation Act is to do just those things. Obviously, all of those are important for planning. The Planning Board has a designee to the Community Preservation Committee. Our Vice Chair, Tim Grandy, is our current designee. So they put their voice in as we start talking about these programs that are coming through, these applications. At the same time, of course, the Planning Board is looking for people who are interested in doing the types of projects that will benefit our community, and whenever possible, we'll steer them to the CPC or try and work with the CPC and other organizations. For example, Habitat for Humanity, in creating a way to develop and fund projects. Things like that were sort of the genesis of another one of our recent proposals, and that's the Plymouth proposed land bank.
And what is the current status of the land bank?
So the land bank legislation has been filed. It's HD 1876. No hearings have been scheduled yet, but we are in the process of meeting with our legislative delegation to provide them with as much information as possible. And those of us who have been active and involved in trying to get this proposal through plan on going up and testifying ourselves on behalf of the town to talk about the unique needs of Plymouth, why Plymouth is so different from so many other communities, given our size, given the fact that we are the fastest growing town in Massachusetts, given our sole source aquifer and the need to protect that, and given the housing needs, the challenges that we face, where we are subject to the area median income determination from Washington that puts us in the Boston, Cambridge area and not the Plymouth County or South Shore area.
So we've recently just had a town meeting. We're taping this in April of 2025. And from time to time at town meeting, we have what we would call planning articles or planning board articles. What's the process for the planning board to consider town meeting articles and have hearings?
Well, the planning board obviously will do some of its own articles, things that we want to accomplish, whether that be changes in the way our zoning works or programs like the land bank or other concepts that we're trying to work on. So we'll have our own, and we'll work with our planning staff to create those. And obviously we look for input from other committees and groups in town. We also consider articles from outside that relate to our planning and our zoning bylaws. So if someone, for example, comes to the town and wants to change the zoning of their property, they have to go through the planning board. As an advisory body, we make a recommendation then to town meeting as to whether or not we think it's a good idea. But ultimately, any town resident-sponsored article goes through regardless. But we do advise on that. And certainly we do try and help whenever possible, if someone is coming forward with an idea, to make it as good as possible, if it's something we want to get behind.
So at the most recent annual town meeting last Saturday, we had a petitioned article to change an area to light industrial. Is that what it was?
It was changed from light industrial to commercial.
Commercial, light industrial, commercial. And so there was a property owner represented by a lawyer. How did you get involved in that as a planning board?
Well, they came to us and they made their presentation. They submitted their application, of course. They then presented it to us. There were meetings directly between the petitioner and our planning staff. So our planning department staff went through it to understand it, to be able to explain any of the nuances to the planning board. We have a very good planning board in terms of people who understand some of the technicalities between having, we have our current alternate as an architect. We have construction people. We have someone who's who's just received his master's in public administration. We have a land surveyor. We have another attorney, as well as myself as an attorney, who understand how these things work. but there are always the nuances, especially when it comes to how they fit in with the town of Plymouth, that our town staff go through. So they went through, they made their recommendations. Presentation came before us. We opened it up for public comment, and we asked the public to comment on that. And then we considered it and made our recommendation.
Good to have a lot of talent on an elected board. That's wonderful.
We are very, very fortunate in that. It's a
Diverse
challenge.
talent, too.
It is. Different voices are always important. Different generational voices are important. Different experiences are important. Different skill sets are important. So yes, it's invaluable. I can't stress how challenging planning is in a town as complex as Plymouth. There's so much that we have to consider. It's kind of a whack-a-mole game. You make a change in one place, another problem pops up somewhere else. So that's part of what we're looking at doing, and that's part of the master planning process, trying to consider those various options and opportunities for us and see what the potential consequences are.
If people wanted to get in touch with you and the planning board, how would they do that?
Well, there's multiple ways. First of all, you can always contact the planning department itself. That's available through the town website. If they want to get in touch with me, I actually maintain my own public interest website. It's steve4plymouth, all one word, .com. And you can certainly reach out to me through there. And I will respond to any email that I receive. And if people want to get a phone call from me afterwards, just leave your number. I'm happy to call back. And I'm happy to meet with anyone to talk about anything. It's important that the community understand what's going on and participate.
In your role as chair, I think you've talked a little bit about it, but have you seen the planning board? Where was it? Where is it now? Where's it going?
Well, I think the planning board, like a lot of the town, became very transactional for a period of time. We became reactive. We waited for things to come to us and then made decisions. We're in the process of changing that now. The master plan, the Holtec community outreach, we're looking at ways to engage the community more, to hear from the community, to see what the community wants, and then as a board, try and effectuate that. Hopefully what I'd like to see happen in the planning board in the next few years and going onward is to see the next generation come up. It's a challenge. It's a lot of work, and young people have other commitments. There's no question. They have jobs. They have families. They have children. Some people are squeezed between having both children and parents that they're taking care of. So I understand not everybody has time to commit to all of that. But hopefully we can encourage more people to make sure that we have an ongoing generational change. People who are making decisions who will live with the consequences of those decisions 20, 30, 40 years even down the road.
Steve, if you're not doing the planning board or practicing law, what do you like to do in your free time?
I hack away at the golf course a bit. I love to walk. I'm constantly on our trails and pathways all around town. And at some point, like to get back to traveling. Again, I lived in Europe for a few years and got the bug back then. But, you know, it's hard to be full-time in Plymouth, and I do sort of treat this as a full-time job between the planning board, the master plan committee, the senior task force, some of the other things that I'm involved with in community life. So at some point, maybe stepping back from that a little bit to go see a little more of the world and get some other people's viewpoints.
Steve, if some people joined us partway through this presentation, what's the one takeaway you'd like people to remember?
Plymouth is an amazing place. It has great opportunities and great challenges. We need to think about Plymouth as a balanced entity. If we want people to come here, live here, and participate, we have to make that affordable for them. At the same time, we can't get rid of the things that bring people here. We can't lose our history. We can't lose our open space. We can't lose our natural beauty. It has to be a balancing act. That's a real challenge because we have many things that are not within our control. So let's do the best we can for the things that are within our control, and let's hear from the community and hopefully have them get involved.
With that, Steve Bolotin, Chair of the Plymouth Planning Board, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Steve. It's been fun.
We appreciate it. And this completes this presentation of Plymouth Profiles. Please join us in the future when we'll have the opportunity again to meet with people from the greater Plymouth area. I'm Steve Triffletti, Plymouth Town Moderator. Thank you for joining us.